Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dan Doolin from Integrity Data. Thanks for taking the time to join our webinar today. Today our webinar is about how to easily stay compliant with mandatory sick leave legislation. So this is something that's becoming more popular in the last couple of years with state and local governments mandating that organizations provide sick time. And so that's presented a couple of challenges to organizations such as yourselves, being able to calculate the time and also stay compliant with all the provisions of each of those plans. So we're going to talk a little bit about how to do that today within Dynamics GP. The presentation today should take, I'm anticipating about 40 minutes, so probably won't be a whole hour, but feel free to put your questions into the question box or type those in. I'll try to keep an eye on that. Also, if you want to have some questions at the end, we'll have some time for that. All right, just a little bit about our agenda for our time together today. We're going to talk about a little bit about Integrity Data. Just give you a quick overview of who we are if you're not familiar with us. Then we're going to talk about some of the different rules that are being put in place related to mandated sick time. We're going to talk about California sick time for the state of California, City of Seattle sick time, Portland sick time, and then we're going to talk about how to administer those plans in Dynamics GP. We'll do a quick demonstration of how to do that, and then of course we'll have time for questions and answers as well. Just a little bit about Integrity Data. We're been a Microsoft Dynamics GP partner since 1996. We started providing products into the Dynamics GP customer base starting in late 2000. That product was a tool to accrue vacation and sick time. It's now known as PTO Manager. That's available from Microsoft. Since then, we've always done development work. That's how we kind of got into the product. But we've got several products. We do development work, and we also provide some consulting services as well. We are the original authors of some of those functions in payroll that Microsoft provides as part of the core product. Those are called core payroll extensions. If you're not familiar with those are or were known as Overtime Rate Manager for calculating blended overtime rates, deductions and arrears, and the payroll integration to payables, which enables you to create a relationship between deductions and taxes and vendors and payables to help with streamlining that process between payroll and payables. So if you're not familiar with those or not using those today, those are part of your payroll package from Microsoft. So check into those if you're not using those. Those are some great tools. Then the HR Payroll Extended Pack has some other great features, some reporting capabilities, labor accrual calculations, and online benefit enrollment, certification, license tracking, just a lot of things around payroll and human resources. Again, those were Integrity Data products. Those are now available from Microsoft through an OEM relationship. So we'll make you aware of some of those things that we've put out there in the past and continue to support and add features to. All right, let's go ahead and get into our topic of the day, which is mandated paid sick time. So a few examples are the California Healthy Workplaces and Healthy Families Act, which was just passed last fall. We'll talk about the key provisions of that. The way this will be structured, we'll talk about some key provisions of some of these plans and acts, and then we'll have links to some resources as well. And what we'll do is we'll send the slide deck out to you when the webinar is complete so that you can have those links and be able to access that information. Obviously much more detailed than what we're going to present today, but you'll have access to that. The Seattle, Washington Paid Sick Time and Paid Safe Time Ordinance, and then the City of Portland Sick Time Leave Ordinance. There's also one in San Francisco. Did some quick research on that, and it's quite similar to the one in Portland. So we didn't separate that out as a separate slides, and we do see similar features between each of these. So it'll get a little bit redundant at some point. So we didn't want to beat the dead horse too much. As we look into the California plan, which as I looked at some of the attendees that were on today, a lot of you are in California. This goes into effect July 1, 2015. So what I found was that there were some sites that said January 1st, 2015, which was sort of my assumption before I started doing the research. But the effective date is July 1, 2015 when you need to start accruing that time. So some of the key provisions, the employees are entitled to at least 24 hours per year. Employers can limit the use to 24 hours per year. The accrual rate is no less than 1 hour for every 30 hours worked, which is a common feature we see across all of the mandated sick time, at least that we've seen so far, which is it's typically 30 hours, but for every X hours that an employee works, you need to provide them with 1 hour of sick time. And there are some additional rules around that as well that we'll get into in some of the other acts. There's a 90-day waiting period to use for new hires. So an employee start accruing, and then they have to get through that 90-day probationary period before they can begin to use that paid sick time that's made available to them. As with most of these mandated sick time plans or acts, you're not required as an employer to pay out any remaining balance at termination. Of course, as an employer, you may want to do that, but most of the interpretations and readings suggest that you don't have to do that. That's an option. In California, you may limit the ability, or you may limit the carryover amount to 48 hours. So from year to year, if the employee doesn't use any of the sick time, you can start to cap how much time they carry over from year to year at 48 hours. So, with a not required to pay out at termination and the carryover things, typically, the reason carryover limits exist is a lot of times to limit the liability that gets produced. If you're not paying out at termination, then that carryover is a little bit less important because you're not carrying the liability for that time to pay the employee if they do terminate. So there's some things to keep in mind there around that and for reporting purposes and accounting purposes. Another interesting point is that if, and this is where you start to see some of the public sector type of provisions kicking in, where if an employee comes back within 1 year, they get that balance back in California. So if the employee terminates, let's say they've got 48 hours of that sick time, unless you paid it out, you would need to keep track of that and keep that balance for that employee. So if they do come back and are rehired, then you would need to reinstate that balance. So there's some pretty significant things here. What we get into, and it's not what we get into with all the plans, but it's not so significant with the ACT in California, is that for each one of them, what we're looking at when we look at the 30 hours of time, it's only time worked within that area. So in this case, state of California. So if I'm a person that is based in Nevada or even live in Nevada, and I work, the company is based in Nevada, but they're working all this time in California, then we'll still have to track that time. So it's not just limited to employers in California. It really centers around the employees, which is kind of interesting. And that's really becomes more significant and more important when we get into the local municipal ordinances such as Portland and Seattle and San Francisco, where it's very easy to have an employee that's in and out of the city. And so what happens is that we have to track the time where that employee is working in the city, even if it's just for part of a day, to get their accrual correct. So start getting into some of those nuances, and it gets to become a little bit more difficult to administer. As with anything, especially when it's a government related ordinance or mandated, the devil is definitely in the details. So let's go ahead and show you some of the California Sick Paid Leave Act information sources. And these are just links that I copied into the slide deck because that's where I found information, and that's where you can also find that information. So there's some interesting information there. Some are shorter than others, and some are a little bit longer. But like I said, we'll certainly send out the slide deck to you so you can have these links and be able to look up information if you need it. And of course, there's others as well. All right, let's take a quick look at the Seattle Paid Sick Time and Paid Safe Time Ordinance, which again is quite similar, but it does have some variances that are different from the others. So effective September 1st, 2012. So this has been in place for a while. We've worked with some customers in the Seattle area that are dealing with this, and it's really only true for employees with more than 4 FTEs. So and what's unique about Seattle is that they have varying tier levels based on employee size. And so I pasted in this graphic from Seattle.gov for how these tiers break out, because trying to get all that information in the bullet points just wasn't going to really work that well. So for the number of equivalents, more than 4 but less than 50, it's a tier 1, tier 2, and then you can see, for the small company tier 1, less than 50, 1 hour for every 40 hours worked. They can use 40 and carry over 40. As the organizations get larger, you can see that the requirement increases to be 1 hour for 30 hours worked. Employees can use more of that time, and they can also carry over more of that time. So it is similar in the fact that it's on the accrual side of it. When we're thinking about how to handle this each pay period, for every 30 or 40 hours that an employee works, depending on the size of the organization, then we need to give them 1 hour of paid sick time. Some other key provisions, again, begin use after 180 days. So that's in our world, we're going to call that a waiting period or a probationary period. Applies to employees who work within the Seattle city limits, so which are called occasional employees. So an occasional employee would be, and the couple of examples we saw where, to me this is sort of I don't know if it's worst case scenario, but an employee that is a delivery person, and they they are on a route that takes them in and out of the city. And the ordinance reads that you need to make your best effort as the employer to calculate how much time of their day they spent in the city limits to calculate their accrual. So, to come up with that 30 hours if they earn that hour of sick time. Now, for occasional employees, there's also this limit or this threshold of you don't need to start doing that until the employee has worked 240 hours in the city. So, person like me, I'm based in Illinois. I've gone to Seattle for days at a time to work. So technically, we would need to keep track of that if I was going to get anywhere near that 240 hours. So if I was working on a payroll implementation in Seattle and I was there for weeks, then at some point, if I went past 240 hours, I could start accruing paid sick time. Now, what's interesting about that is I would only be able to use that, and this is true for Seattle and Portland, is that I would only be able to use that time for a day when I was scheduled to be in Seattle and was sick. So if I was out doing a payroll implementation in Seattle, again, I'd already accrued sick time. Maybe I got some bad seafood down at the fish market. Not that you would ever would there. More likely to get bad seafood in Illinois, I know. But but if I would get sick and I was scheduled to work in Seattle, then I could use that paid time in Seattle. Now that's kind of a stretch being from Illinois, but if you think about a person that maybe is in Redmond or Tacoma or one of those outlining suburbs or cities around Seattle, and those employees are in and out of Seattle, we have to track that time. So, the one customer that we had, they had salons and things like that, all over that area. And so when employees when those employees are at that store in Seattle, they need to accrue this time and keep track of that. So we'll talk a little bit about how to do that as I go through the demonstration. They do have some provisions about using the time in 1 hour increments. They were specific in this one about donating to other employees, and we'll talk about how to do that. And in this case, the sick time is reinstated if the employee is rehired within 7 months. So that's one thing that's unique about Seattle. So again, similar concept to the others, but a couple of unique provisions, especially with the sizes of the organizations and how they need to accrue the sick time for the employees. A couple of resources that I used, seattle.gov, right from the city website. And there were a couple of others that I found. Typically what you'll find is that some law firms will put out some documents on these as well. Okay, when we look at Portland, it's been in effect since July, so just about 6 months now. Employers are entitled up to 40 hours per year. All employers with more than 5 employees must have worked 240 hours within the year to use the sick time. So again, that's also similar to that 240-hour rule in Seattle as well, and that is optional. So as with kind of how we see with these things, where if you want to make it more advantageous to the employee or a better deal for the employee, that's up to the employer, and that's typically going to be okay. So a 90-day waiting period to use for new hires. Accrue 1 hour for every 30 hours worked, again, within the city. Also not required to pay out at termination. Their rule is 40 hours. It can be carried over from year to year. And rehires retain their balance if they're rehired within 6 months. And if they transfer and return within 2 years, the balance is reinstated. So if they get transferred, and to be more specific on that, if they get transferred for work reasons and then come back, it's a 2-year time limit on that. And also in Portland, the public sector organizations are excluded. So that's kind of interesting about that. And the other scenarios, they are not. Which typically, and also a couple things as far as what's true across all of these, is that if you have paid time off, if you're already offering a paid time off plan, which includes sick time, that's fine. You don't necessarily have to add a special sick time balance, as long as the rules of that paid time off plan are meet the minimum requirements of the ordinances in the Act. So also what's true about all of them is that if you give the employees a time in advance, so if you said, well, in Portland, we're going to give the employees 40 hours up front at the beginning of the year, and then you don't have to have a carryover capability. So that's one thing that does apply to all of them. Now, what's interesting about this is that you might already have that PTO plan in place for full-time employees and be all set there. What would be new in a lot of cases are the part-time employees that are not getting any paid time off right now, or any sick time or vacation time. Those are the ones we would need to add. So I would assume that you could have retain the PTO plan if you have that for your existing full-time employees and even new full-time employees. But for part-time employees, you would need to add the sick time that complies with the local ordinances as well as the state act in California. So again, just some things to think about. Our goal on this webinar is to give you some of the big key provisions and show you how to start doing some of this in Dynamics GP. Certainly there's a lot of details related to the acts that we talked about, or that we haven't talked about, that I mentioned earlier, that will be things that you need to look at and develop processes around. So some of the information related to this, it's funny, some of the best information I found was a presentation that was put together for the city of Eugene, Oregon, as they were looking at Portland's plan. So I didn't look to see if they're considering a plan or if they've adopted a plan like this, but it was some of the most concise information that went through. The FAQ document related to from portlandoregon.gov was very lengthy, but there's a lot of good information there. So if you're in Portland or have to deal with this with employees that work in Portland, there's some information sources that are there that I use to pull the information together for the webinar. All right, when we think about enforcing these and administering these for your employees in Dynamics GP, and when we think about the accrual options in Dynamics GP for leave, you've got the payroll accrual piece and payroll, which is very limited, just vacation and sick time. There's HR attendance and human resources. There's the PTO manager product that we mentioned earlier that simply accrues vacation and sick time. And then there's the comprehensive leave manager product from Integrity Data that we offer. And when we look at the provisions of these acts and ordinances, there's one that will help you administer these plans and that we have been using, especially in Seattle, for a couple of years now. And that's the comprehensive leave manager product. So when we talk about the comprehensive leave manager product, which is a product from Integrity Data, some key features of that product related to this are that they let you manage an unlimited number of leave codes. So if you've already got your vacation and maybe a regular full-time sick plan, but you need to add the part-time sick plan to comply with these rules, then you can set up that sick plan and really any other sick plan that or leave plan that you need to administer. You can configure the complex sick accruals with Comprehensive Leave Manager. And so what we've done in Seattle, we've been able to do some of that with Comprehensive Leave Manager and the features we've had in that product for several years. What we've done recently is added some additional capabilities into our accrual schedule function, which lets us handle these features much more easily. So you can accrue time on specific hours, and that, of course, is associated with pay codes. And that's always been a requirement to some degree. For example, we only want to accrue vacation time on hours worked versus, on-call time or even vacation time that the employee takes. You don't want them to accrue on vacation time. We've always been able to do that. Now, what we see in these, and that's somewhat common, but what we see in these situations are that pay codes are typically used to keep track of the time that the employee works in a specific location. So if the employee is working several hours in the city of Seattle, then we'd have a separate pay code for that. They record their time against that. Then that's what we would use to accrue the time for the Seattle paid sick time ordinance. Okay, so that's important. Comprehensive Leave Manager gives the ability to enforce waiting periods, maximum accruals, enforce the carryover limits, and also handle the simple payout transactions for the employees. Okay, so if you do decide that you want to pay some of that time out, then you have that capability. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick look here at the Comprehensive Leave Manager and how we'd accommodate these acts and ordinances within Dynamics GP. So we'll switch over to my demonstration environment here. This is Dynamics GP 2013 Release 2 with our newly added features for Comprehensive Leave Manager. So we're going to focus on the accrual schedule, then we're also going to show you some additional features of the Comprehensive Leave Manager just to sort of round out the bigger picture of the product for you. So on leave setup, this is where we set up our leave plans. Okay, so traditionally, I'll show you one example. We've used this for times such as PTO time. Okay, so you can see we've got accrual schedule, based on a year's work calculation and hours worked. Based on years of work, there's a 90-day waiting period, so on and so forth. And we use the PTO pay code to take care of that. So what we've done is we've added some features to help with the sick time calculations. And most of those features are on the accrual schedule window. So here's my California sick time. It's an accrual. I put the effective date in 7/1/2015. I'm going to come back to the accrual schedule here in just a second. You have the option to accrue the time during payroll processing. You can also do that outside of payroll processing, and you can still do it based on the number of hours worked and outside of payroll processing. What's nice about doing it during payroll processing is that all the information is up to date to put on the employee pay stub in that pay run. Okay, so in this case, we do have a waiting period for a one-time waiting period for 90 days. So what that means is that the time will accrue for the employee, but it won't show as available to them. It'll show up in what we call a pending field or column, so that it's there and we can see how much is there, but the employee won't see that until they pass that 90-day threshold. There's really no maximum or cap on the balance related to California, and here is how we enforce a carryover limit at 40 hours. Okay. Down below we have our earned pay codes. I just left that as hourly and salary. So if the employee works their regular primary pay codes, they're going to accrue the time. And then the pay code used to take the sick time is this pay code I named CALST for California sick time. I know, very, very creative on my part, but that's the code that we would use. Now, when we go back and look at the accrual schedule, this is really where it's important. And we've added several capabilities to this window. What I should do is show you a screenshot of the previous window that we had. But typically in the previous window, we could have one rule and one range. Okay, so now we've got the capability to have multiple rules that calculate time and sort of accumulate it amongst all the rules. And then we have multiple ranges within each rule, so 2 ranges within each rule. So in this case, when we look at Rule 1, what we're saying is that for every X hours that the employee works in the calendar year, they're going to accrue time. Okay. So in this case, for every 30 hours that you see in the range below, they're going to accrue 1 hour. And I put a maximum of 5. That's probably a little bit high, and that's going to be a per pay period maximum, because that would be 150 hours or something in a pay period. But what this will do is keep track of the years worked for this employee in the calendar year. So if the employee already has 290 hours and they work, let's say, 40 hours in a week, they're going to cross the threshold at 300 hours. And in that same pay period, they're also going to cross the threshold at 330 hours. Okay, so they're actually going to accrue 2 hours of paid sick time in that pay period. So the limit of maximum of 5 is probably a little bit high, but make sure we're not cutting anybody short. Now, what's important to note is the calculation factor on other types of ranges, years worked, and so on. It takes the calculation factor times the number of hours that the employee has worked in the pay period. So traditionally, this calculation works differently. In this case, where it's set to every X hours, it calculates 1 hour for every time they work 30 hours. So this, if you've used PTO Manager or if you've used Comprehensive Leave Manager in the past, this calculation works differently than the typical calculation factor, is the reason I point that out. Because I even got surprised by this as I was preparing for the webinar. So what this does is it lets, and previously what we had to do before this rule was we had to set up every every increment. So 0 to 30, 1 hour, 31 to 60, 61 to 90, 91 to 120. Way to do that all the way down to 2,080 hours using Comprehensive Leave Manager before this feature. Now it worked, and it was only a one-time setup, and it was a lot better than any other option out there, but we knew that there was a better way to do it, so that's why we've added this layer, not only for these plans, but for other plans as well. We've gotten into some union plans that are very complex that have multiple layers of calculations. So this will work very easily and be very easy to set this up. Okay, so that's how we'd set up the California time. If we look at Seattle, it's similar. They have a 180-day waiting period. Now here's where I put in a pay code specific to the area, so Seattle hourly. So if the employee was in and out of the city, we could record their time to the time that they were in the city of Seattle working within city limits to this specific pay code. In that case, we would probably remove these other pay codes so that it was only accruing on the time that they worked in Seattle. Okay. Again, no maximum, and I didn't put any carryover limit there as well. I think they did have a way that you could carry over some time, but I didn't put that into this provision. Okay. So when we look at the accrual schedule for Seattle, I did something a little bit different here. For the occasional employees, I added this 241-hour rule just to show some of the additional capabilities of the accrual schedule. So for every X hours, again, same type of calculation, for every 30 hours, the employee gets 1 hour of sick time, and I kept the maximum at 5 there. But an additional capability of the Comprehensive Leave Manager is to say, well, that's nice, but this doesn't start until this employee works 241 hours. So you might set up, so it's a little bit fuzzy in the information I was looking at of how do you differentiate between a regular employee and an occasional employee, as far as, does an employee that works in Seattle all the time, do they have to work 240 hours before they can begin accruing, versus the quote-unquote occasional employee who works in and out? That part didn't become clear to me as I was doing the research. So certainly I need to do a little bit more work on that to make sure that we get the right answer on that for our customers there that are doing that. So to sum that up, I don't know if the 240-hour rule applies to everybody or not. Either way, we have a way to enforce that within the Comprehensive Leave Manager. Okay, so that again, that's very similar to some of the other plans. If we look at Portland, I've got 2 set up for Portland here, I think. So one was the old way and one was the new way. And this, excuse me, this would be the new way. So again, very similar, 90-day waiting period, carryover limit set at 40 hours, the accrual schedule every X hours, 30. Now, what I didn't, well, I guess we don't need to talk about that it's another provision for Seattle, but we'll let that go for now. For Portland, as you can see, it's very similar. Now, this one's a little bit different in the fact that they have a cap at 40 hours per year. So instead of having if we highlight the rule here, instead of having the maximum for the per pay period, we have the maximum set for the year. So once they hit that 40 hours, they would stop accruing. So that's the thing that's unique about Portland as far as the accrual schedule is concerned. Okay, again, using the Portland sick time. So if you have stores or locations in each of these cities, it is possible to administer all these plans in the same environment. using Comprehensive Leave Manager. As you can see, I've got them all set up in my environment. Just different leave codes, different pay codes for the accrual, and then different pay codes for the use of the time as well. Okay, just checking the question box here. It's kind of hard to, let me see if I can read the question here. It's not letting me read it very well. California law says we must report periodically to the employee what their sick balance is. My experience is that GP doesn't report properly on the paycheck when using something like PTO. Will your system develop the balance reporting so it shows up correctly on the employee paycheck? Yes. So within Comprehensive Leave Manager, we have, in the user guide, we have instructions for bringing balance information out to the pay stub. And you can do that for several leave balances. So you would be able to show that California sick time and the balance on the pay stub. It's on the, it can be on the pay stub as well as on the, if they get a check, and of course on their earnings statement if it's direct deposit. So I should answer that question just so. Okay, though. Having trouble with the question box here. Okay, so I'll make sure I update the questions. Thank you, David, for that question. And I'll try to keep monitoring that. Okay, let's take a look at, now that we've set up the accrual schedules and the leave codes, what are some other things that we can do with Comprehensive Leave Manager? We talked about payouts and some of those things. So first of all, if we need to assign the leave codes to an employee, we can do that a couple of different ways. One is if you hire a new employee, you can come down to leave, and you can pull up your employee ID. So I haven't assigned any of these yet. I could say that Adam Barr gets California sick time. Okay, he's now assigned. Okay, and we could save that. Okay, another way to do this. Okay, I went to the wrong place. Sorry about that. I thought there was we have a quick assignment window also, which lets you quickly assign the leave to the employees. I might have missed it in the other menu option. Another way is to do a mass assignment, which is you can assign the leave code to all employees, and you can do some restrictions also. But it lets you assign the new leave code to many employees all at one time. So that's a nice feature as well. Now, when employees earn time or when they accrue time, we want to be able to look at some information about that. So let's look at, I haven't accrued time for these plans. Let's look at, as a better example, let's look at the PTO time for Adam Barr, just to show, because I know there's a lot of data within this. Whoops, I don't want to go to the accrual schedule. I want to go ahead and look at the payroll summary, or I'm sorry, the leave summary for Adam. And here you can see all the codes that we've assigned to Adam. We kind of abuse Adam a little bit in demonstrations, but you can see all the different codes assigned to Adam. We can double click on PTO or single click and see his earned amount for the time period that's assigned at the top of the window, how much he's earned, how much he's taken, any adjustments that have been made, any remaining time, which would be his current available balance. And then that pending time column is the amount of time that the employee has earned in that waiting period. So we can still see that even, so sometimes we get into situations where the employee has some time pending, but maybe something has happened and you want to let the employee use that time, so you'll know what's there. You can transfer it over to their available balance and let them go ahead and take that time and pay them for it. So that, again, is up to you, but there are ways to do that. If we double click, what we'll see is every transaction that has impacted that employee balance. So we'll see the accruals. We'll see, so you can see here the accrual, direct deposit, whatever on 412. If I had, if they had taken transactions here, so the employee used PTO time and you were using daily transactions, so in payroll transactions, I used PTO time on 4/13/2017. That would appear in the taken from and taken to, so we can know exactly when that employee took that time. In this case, I've just got some accruals, so we can see how much time they're accruing. You can print the report. With Comprehensive Leave Manager, we provide some self-service tools as well. Those have traditionally been on Business Portal. Of course, with GP 2015, the Business Portal capability will cease to exist as they move to web client access for employees. And so we haven't released those yet. We're releasing our GP 2015 compliant products tomorrow. But we do not have, we'll probably wait till the R2 or Service Pack 2 release for GP 2015 to get our self-service tools up to date. So we've been working on these abilities to do the more advanced accruals instead because we felt that was more important. So you can see everything that impacts the employee balance and you can print that report for the employee. Now, in that situation where you need to do an adjustment or a payout, if the employee terminates, you can certainly do that through the leave transaction entry window. So if we do a payout transaction, put in the date, and then we put in the comment, payroll batch. So you can send this transaction directly to a batch. So if we did this, it would take the time, it would post a transaction for the PTO balance, and then also create the payroll transaction as well in the batch that we specify. So one simple process to take care of both of those situations. It's streamlining the process, keeping everything in sync, keeping the audit trail in place so that everybody knows what happened to that balance. So an example would be if the employee terminated, you paid them out their sick time, and then they were rehired, and they came back and said, well, I get my 40 hours of mandated sick time that I had when I left because the law says that. And you would say, well, no, we paid you for that. They would say, oh, no, you didn't. Of course, you would have some payroll transactions associated with that, but you would also be able to come here first and see that, yes, indeed, you did create that payout transaction and zero out their balance. So those are just some of the key features about Comprehensive Leave Manager. The main piece that we're focused on for these plans is the accrual, but you can see there's some other key features here related to Comprehensive Leave Manager that help you manage leave from a total perspective, not just for the sick time accruals. Let's go and go back to our PowerPoint. Just real quick, I want to mention some of the other products that Integrity Data has that we offer for payroll and for human resources. I'm not going to spend any amount of time on these, but just wanted to list them. Mid-pay period rate changes, overtime hours rules, enhanced retirement plans, the Comprehensive Leave Manager we've talked about, and a whole list of others. And so we're always working on more. We've got a couple of things in the works that we'll be announcing probably at Convergence. So if you're going to be at Convergence, please stop by our booth. And number one, say hi. Number two, we can talk about any new things we're doing or talk about any needs that you have that maybe we haven't thought of yet. So, okay. I want to mention a promotion that we have going. We just sent out a bunch of emails yesterday, so you might have gotten, or maybe it was Monday, you might have gotten some information about that. Sailing smoothly through Dynamics GP Payroll in 2015. So the promotion is you buy 2 products, you get 1 free, or you can, we're offering savings on our Payroll Essentials bundle, which the Payroll Essentials bundle offers 3 capabilities. One is to email earning statements and W-2s to employees. The second is to do negative payroll transactions. And the third capability is to much more easily process negative deductions in Dynamics GP. So that's what's in the Payroll Essentials bundle. If you want more information about that, you can go to integrity-data.com/HRP and then SAIL, SAIL 15. And that runs through the end of February. Okay, at this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions. I can unmute folks, or you can type it in with several on the call. It might be easier if we just go ahead and use the question box. While we're doing that, I just want to say thanks for taking the time. I hope this was helpful for you. We just wanted to deliver some information that was helpful to you and go over some of those key provisions and have those links there for you. And of course, we'll send out the entire slide deck to you. If you're not familiar with me, if we've never met before, this is me here. And this is Keith Schmidt on our team. He's another account executive, so you might have worked with him. Been doing this a long time as well and is very knowledgeable with payroll. And then Julie and Mike from our support team. Those are usually the people that everyone knows. So, but feel free to contact me with any questions. If you got anything you want to say, hey, will this work, or can we do this? I'm more than happy to try to help with those. There's my contact information and our phone number as well. So if there's any other questions, I'll be happy to answer those. If you've got a lengthy question that you don't want to type, you can send me a quick chat and say, hey, unmute me, and I'd be happy to do that. Otherwise, I want to say thanks, and I look forward to speaking with you in the future if you're going to drop off. There's one question. Can this create entry for GL to record the liability? Another question by David. We do not create GL transactions for liability. The Comprehensive Leave Manager does include an Excel-based report that does calculate liability. So, and the way that works is it takes the balance for the leave code and the take and pay, the take and pay code for the employee. So if I've got 40 hours and my pay rate is $20 per hour, it would show all the information and calculate the liability out to be the $800 liability. In that report, it's an Excel-based report, so it's a pivot table. You can do the total. You can sort it by employee, by department, by position, by class, however you need to sort that liability if you're posting that to several different GL accounts. But Comprehensive Leave Manager does not create the GL transaction. Any other questions? Thanks again, everyone. I appreciate it. I'll hang around for a few minutes. So if there's any other questions, please feel free to type those into the question box. Thanks, and have a great afternoon.